Let's go, we're gonna be late.
Fun fact, the first time I almost died was at the age of 9. The murder weapon? A Jimmy Dean sausage.
Sheldon chokes on a hot dog. One bite. That's it. His body reacts like the world just ended.
There we go. There we go.
It's interesting the things you think.
And after that, no more solid food. For weeks. A few months later, his mom won't let him do something he wants. So he grabs a mop and scrubs the entire house until 3 in the morning. Not because it's dirty, because it's the only thing in his life he can actually control. Then his mom refuses to sign a permission slip for a school trip. A normal 9-year-old would sulk for a day.
I'm ready to go to college.
Sheldon secretly applies to Harvard, out of spite. Every single time, the adults around him say the same thing. Weird. Dramatic. Just Sheldon being Sheldon. But keep watching, because it gets so much worse. Season 7. His father dies, and Sheldon doesn't cry. Not at the hospital, not at the funeral. He just sits down in a chair and freezes. 27 days later, his family sits through a sermon about grief, and Sheldon pulls out a laptop and starts working, in the middle of it. Weeks after that, his mom asks the family to hold hands and imagine his father's spirit sitting at the table with them. One small thing. She's not asking for logic, she's asking for comfort. And Sheldon looks her in the eye and says no. Ghosts aren't real. He won't do it. For years, people watching this show called this the same thing, over and over. Cold. Broken. Just Sheldon being Sheldon. But here's what nobody stopped to ask. What if it was never about being cold at all? What if the smartest kid in Texas had a brain running years ahead of everyone around him, and a heart that was still exactly 9 years old? Welcome back to the lab. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about Sheldon that the show tells you constantly and that everybody still misses. His IQ was measured off the charts before he could legally ride a roller coaster. He was doing college-level physics while other 9-year-olds were still learning long division. Everyone treats that like a superpower. Nothing but upside. Except intelligence doesn't grow alone. It's supposed to grow next to something else. Emotional maturity. The part of a person that learns how to sit with disappointment, how to read a room, how to comfort somebody who's hurting. In most kids, those two things develop roughly side by side. In Sheldon, they didn't. His mind was sprinting. His heart never left the starting line. Child psychologists who study gifted kids actually gave this gap a name decades ago. Asynchronous development. It just means the different parts of a person, the intellectual side and the emotional side, grow at wildly different speeds. And when the gap gets big enough, the outside world stops seeing a child. It starts seeing a machine. Nobody around Sheldon had ever heard that term. Not his parents, not his teachers, not the kids at his school. So they did what people always do with something they don't understand. They called it cold. They called it broken. And once you see that gap, you can't unsee it. Because it explains almost everything that happens to this family for the next 7 years. Go back to that hot dog for a second. A choking scare would rattle any kid. But for most 9-year-olds, that fear passes in a day or two. For Sheldon, it doesn't pass. It locks. His brain, the same brain solving equations his teachers can't check, has no idea what to do with a feeling that big. So it does the only thing it knows how to do. It shuts the whole system down. No solid food. For weeks. His parents drag him to a psychiatrist who has honestly no better idea what's going on than they do. Now think about the mop scene again with this lens on. His mother tells him no. A simple, ordinary no that every kid on earth hears 100 times a year. And Sheldon can't process it as, I'm disappointed. He doesn't have the wiring for that yet. So the feeling has to go somewhere. It comes out as obsessive control over the one thing in the house he actually can control: cleanliness. Same thing with Harvard. An unsigned permission slip is nothing, a blip. But to a brain that size, with no emotional shock absorber to soften it, it registers as a full-blown injustice. So the response isn't proportional, it's nuclear. 9 years old, and he's already applying to an Ivy League school out of pure spite. Here's what's easy to miss watching this the first time. Every one of these moments starts exactly the same way. A completely normal, completely survivable disappointment. And every single time, Sheldon's reaction is wildly out of proportion to the actual event. That's not a character flaw. That's the signature of the gap. A genius-level brain trying to process a kid-sized problem with kid-sized tools and completely overloading. And the family around him? They don't see a gap, they see a tantrum. So they manage him the only way they know how. They give in. Every time. Which means Sheldon never actually learns how to sit with disappointment because he's never required to. The gap doesn't close. It just gets papered over, year after year. Here's where it stops being just Sheldon's problem. Season 2. George Sr. gets offered the job of his life, a coaching position at a college in Tulsa. This is his one shot out of a career he's hated for years. It comes up at the dinner table, and the second Sheldon realizes his routine might change, he panics. Not, "I'd rather not move," panic. Full meltdown. And George, watching his son come apart at the table, quietly turns the job down. Nobody in that room clocks what actually just happened. They don't see a father sacrificing his dream for a son who can't regulate a feeling yet. They see Sheldon being difficult, and George being a good dad for giving in. The gap stays invisible. The cost doesn't. Same pattern, different year. Sheldon wants a computer. A totally reasonable ask for a kid doing his level of work. But this family doesn't have the money, and it turns out his mom's been hiding cash from his dad for years just to keep the household afloat. The request cracks that secret wide open. His parents have the worst fight of their marriage. His mom takes the kids and leaves for a while. Sheldon didn't do anything malicious. He just wanted a computer. But because nobody around him understands what they're actually dealing with, his ordinary request detonates an already fragile marriage. And then there's Missy. Missy's first heartbreak happens, and she's a wreck, snapping at everyone, spiraling. Sheldon's response is to complain that she's too loud, and he's trying to focus. And his mother, on autopilot after years of managing the gap, takes his side instantly. Doesn't ask Missy what happened, just protects Sheldon, like always. That single moment becomes the spark that blows the whole family apart. George finally says out loud what he's been swallowing for years, that Mary only has eyes for one kid in this house. He ends up at a bar, getting close to a neighbor who isn't his wife. Missy runs away from home. One kid's inability to read a room. A ripple that nearly ends a marriage. And here's the detail that really lands the point. Around this same stretch of the show, the family takes part in a twin study, and it reveals something nobody expected. Missy has off-the-charts emotional intelligence. She reads people better than the actual psychologists running the test. Which means the sibling everyone assumed was the normal one has spent years quietly absorbing every unspoken tension in that house, while the genius one couldn't read a room to save his life. Same family, same gene pool, 2 kids. One sprinted ahead in IQ and stalled out on EQ. The other went the opposite direction. And nobody in that house had the language to talk about either of them accurately. Everything up to this point is practice. Season 7 is the final exam, and it's the moment the gap stops being awkward and starts being devastating. George Sr. dies of a heart attack. Days, just days, before the family was set to move to the house he'd worked his whole life for. And Sheldon's brain does not know what to do with a loss that size. Losing a father isn't a math problem. There's no equation. So his mind reaches for the only tool it's ever trusted: logic. He sits in a chair after hearing the news and freezes. He doesn't cry at the hospital. He doesn't cry at the funeral. In the show's own canon, it flatly does not happen. Instead, his brain runs escape simulations. He imagines himself as a character from Star Trek, someone who can rewind time and fix the one morning he can't stop replaying. The last morning he saw his dad alive, when he barely looked up from what he was doing. 27 days after the funeral, the family sits through a sermon specifically about grief. And Sheldon pulls out a brand new laptop, a gift he'd gotten from his doctors, and starts working right there in the pew. When people give him strange looks, he calls them idiots. That's not defiance. That's a 9-year-old's coping toolkit trying to hold up the weight of an adult-sized tragedy and buckling under it in the only way it knows how. Then comes the moment that's almost impossible to watch. His mother, barely holding herself together, asks the family to close their eyes, hold hands, and imagine his father's spirit sitting there with them. It costs nothing. It's not asking Sheldon to believe anything. It's asking him to give his grieving mother 30 seconds of comfort. And Sheldon says no. Ghosts don't exist. It violates the laws of physics. In that instant, being factually correct matters more to him than his mother's grief. Not because he doesn't love her, but because comforting a person who is suffering with no logical justification is a skill his emotional side was never built out enough to perform. Even his eventual act of kindness proves the same point. He agrees to get baptized to make her happy, but does it in a full wetsuit so he won't catch germs from the water. He gets an ear infection anyway. And in his own narration, years later, he notes flatly that it was worth it because his mom was happy. That's the whole gap in one image. The intellect calculating the correct output. The heart, still 9 years old, quietly trying to catch up from 3 steps behind. Now, you could watch all of that and say, fine, that's just how the writers built the character. Sure, but here's the part that makes this more than a theory. Asynchronous development isn't something we're inventing to make a cartoon Texas sitcom feel deep. It's a real, decades-old concept in gifted child research, used to explain a pattern seen again and again in real, profoundly gifted kids. Kids whose intellectual age and emotional age can sit years apart. Outbursts that look disproportionate. Meltdowns over things that seem tiny from the outside. Difficulty reading social cues that come naturally to peers. Not because the kid is broken, because 2 different clocks inside the same brain are running at 2 different speeds. Watch Sheldon through that lens, and every weird moment in this show stops being a quirky joke and starts being a documented pattern with a name. The hot dog, the mop, the laptop at the sermon, the wetsuit. All of it is the same clock problem, showing up over and over in bigger and bigger stakes. The show never says this out loud. It doesn't need to. It just keeps showing you the gap, scene after scene, and trusting you to eventually connect it yourself. Here's the part that actually gives this story its ending. Jump forward to the grown version of this character in The Big Bang Theory. Same rigidity, same difficulty with sarcasm, same instinct to retreat into logic the second things get emotionally loud. For a long time, that looked like proof the gap never closes. That he's just permanently broken this way. But look closer at where adult Sheldon actually ends up. He gets married. He has kids. In the show's own finale, we see him, genuinely, if a little clumsily, showing up for his son's hockey game, fighting through his own resistance to do it anyway. That's not nothing. That's the emotional side of the clock, decades late, finally lapping the intellectual side that took off without it in 3rd grade. The gap didn't close in one dramatic season. It closed the way these things actually close in real people. Slowly, unevenly, mostly invisible until you compare the start to the end and realize how far the distance actually was. So go back to the very last scene of the show, the one you've probably seen clipped 100 times. Sheldon, standing in his childhood bedroom, about to leave for Caltech for good. Missy asks him if he'll remember her, and he tells her he has an eidetic memory, so he has no choice. For years, that line gets read as the perfect final proof that Sheldon never changed at all, cold to the very end. But run it through everything you just watched. A kid whose emotional vocabulary was never built out enough to say, "I love you and I'm scared to leave you," reaches for the one language he's always trusted completely: fact, certainty, permanence. In his own way, "I am incapable of forgetting you" might be the closest thing to "I will always love you" that this particular brain, on that particular day, was able to produce. It's not that Sheldon didn't feel it. It's that nobody ever taught this genius what to do with a feeling that big. Sheldon Cooper spent 7 seasons being called cold by the people who loved him most. Not because he didn't feel things, because the part of him built to handle feelings that size never got the years it needed to catch up. Whether you buy this take or think I'm reading way too much into a sitcom, let me know in the comments. That's exactly what this channel is for. We're always here in the lab. See you in the next one.